In this lesson, we're going to build upon what we learned last time and talk about note names for the treble and bass clef, ledger lines, and how the staffs are really connected. Let's look at the treble clef first. The treble clef is also called the G clef because the note that little curl wraps around is a G. The second line of the treble clef is always G. Once you know the name of a note, you can easily figure out the rest. Notes going up move forward in the alphabet. Notes going down move backward in the alphabet. The musical alphabet stops at G, so after G, we start again at A. Notice that G is a line note and the next space up is therefore A. Then it's B, C, and so on, line space as you go up. The note right before G is F because it's one step lower. As long as you know the order of the first 7 letters of the alphabet, you're all set. The bass clef works in a similar way. The bass clef is also known as the F clef. Notice that the 2 dots in the F clef conveniently wrap around that same line. The fourth line is F, and the 2 dots signify that. Once again, if the notes go up, we move forward in the alphabet. If they go down, we move backwards in the alphabet. Now we're going to talk about ledger lines, which will help us when we run out of staff lines. You can see here the 3 highest notes of the treble clef, E, F, and G. But what if we need a higher note? We can add ledger lines to indicate notes that exist outside of the staff. Ledger lines are not full length, they're just wide enough to hold the note. It acts like another line. So in this case, since the top space of the staff is G, the next line that we add will be A. We can add as many as we need, and as notes climb, we just assign them note names the same way. Up one step means add the next letter in the alphabet. We can use them going down as well. As the notes descend, we just work backwards in the alphabet. Ledger lines can be used on any clef. Here are the lower ledger lines for the bass clef. And here are the higher ledger lines on the bass clef. Now there's one here that's really special, and that's the C circled here. It has to do with how the treble clef and bass clef are connected in the grand staff. You remember in the last lesson we talked about the grand staff. The vertical line and the bracket connecting the treble clef and bass clef form the grand staff. Now imagine that there's one more line right in between those 2 staffs. This line actually does exist. We just never see it full length like this. It's a ledger line and we only see it when we need it. The note that sits in this line is middle C. Here it is, smack dab in the middle of the 2 staffs. The interesting thing about middle C is that it's not always positioned smack dab in the middle. We sometimes place it closer to whatever staff it's working for. Here's what I mean by that. If you're singing on the treble clef and middle C is needed, we want to move it next to the treble clef staff. If it wasn't, it would be really difficult to read. Imagine a sentence where one word is lower than the other words. That's tough to read, so we keep the note in the line of sight. If you're singing on the bass clef, it'll be closer to that clef, so it's near the other notes that you're reading, but regardless of where it sits, it's always middle C. Here's another way to think about ledger lines that might make reading a little easier. Look at the section circled in orange. Those are the exact same notes on both clefs. That fourth space G on the bass clef is shown directly above as it would be written if you were singing that note on the treble clef. The notes shown here can be written on either clef if we use ledger lines. This keeps our eye on one staff, and that ultimately makes sight singing much easier. This concludes our lesson on note names. Next, we're going to start looking in depth at rhythm.